Okay, welcome to week 4, everybody. We are halfway through the term, and y'all are doing great. Make sure to keep up with all of your assignments so you don't fall too far behind, because we got quite a bit of work ahead of us, even though we're at the halfway mark. This week, we are going to discuss the Affordable Care Act, and we're going to discuss the health insurance market and the marketplace. And to that point, I want to give you some words of wisdom from Thomas Sowell, who's probably this century's greatest mind on economics. And his views on how payments by third parties distorts healthcare decisions is really interesting. Basically, what he says is that third-party payments are at the heart of much confusion about the cost of medical treatment, and they're a major factor in the increased cost of that treatment. Of course, by third-party payers, we mean insurances or government payer types. And to that point, in government-run medical systems, the public pays taxes for its medical care that is rendered or that is paid for through government-run systems. The taxes pay it either completely or partially with a share that's being paid by the actual individual. So political slogans, we hear this every election cycle too, about bringing down the cost of medical care. It's really invariably about programs or policies that are directed toward lowering the price paid directly by the patient. But the fact that only part of the costs are reimbursed by direct out-of-pocket payments from individuals is in no way indicating that the total cost of the particular medical treatment is lower, any lower really than before. So when the public pays part of its medical costs in taxes that the government uses to subsidize medical treatment, or in premiums that are paid to health insurance companies, none of that lowers the total cost in the slightest. So to the extent that direct payments by patients are lower than they would be if they had to cover the full costs, medical treatments tend to be sought more often. And that alone is enough to cause the total cost of medical care to rise, not fall. And whether these lower payments are due to price control or to supplementary payments by insurance companies or the government, the net result is that lower prices tend to cause more of any goods or services to be demanded, including medical treatment. So to the extent that third-party payments require bureaucracy to administer these payments, the people in those bureaucracies still have to be paid, adding still more costs to medical care, the high administrative overhead. And then finally, there's costs of medical care that are not counted in any economic statistics that compare costs in different countries with different medical payment systems. And those are the cost in pain, debilitation, premature death, as well as costs in lost income while someone is unable to work, or if they are unable to really function for any medical reason. So given that with insurance, I mean, there's no doubt that people that insurance or those who actually have a lot of money saved, who have the wealth to be able to do it, can get more comfortable accommodations and more amenities than those without, and can afford more elective procedures, maybe even cosmetic procedures. Those to just take that and then discuss people without health insurance as if they didn't have access to health care can be misleading. The availability of medical care, regardless of health insurance, in fact, reduces the incentives to become insured. So some uninsured people have low incomes, but others with incomes that are sufficient to be able to purchase health insurance simply choose to use their money for other things, especially when they're young and feel less at risk. So the real question is how much medical care is available, whether or not particular individuals have health insurance. So even the most poverty-stricken person on the streets in the United States will be treated in an emergency room with or without health insurance. Abandoned babies will likewise be treated without regard of their ability to pay. So 40%, according to Thomas Sowell, 40% of uninsured Americans under the age of 25, or more than 60%, are under 35. So fewer than 10% of people who are over 55 are uninsured, despite the widespread political use of an image of old people who have to choose between food and medical care. That may be the political image of the uninsured, but it's hardly the reality, according to Thomas Sowell. So third-party payments for medical care transfer the decision-making ability to determine how much medical care and of what kind each individual will receive. So given that economic resources for all sorts are scarce, that is sufficient to provide everyone with enough to satisfy the desires. So rationing, which is simply another way of saying a reduction in benefits or limited access to benefits, is going to have to take place, whether it's for medical goods or services or anything else, and whether those decisions are made by each person individually or by a government agency collectively for the population at large. But the location of that decision-making power can change the decision itself, with consequences that can be very different from what they would have been if they were made elsewhere. And once we go down that path, it's very unlikely that we will be able to retreat from that. So what's an example of that? Well, in Britain, medical care officials determine who can and who cannot receive certain expensive treatments. It's based on those officials' judgment or any formulas that they come up with or guidelines about how much quality of life is likely to be achieved and for how many years. Thus, an 80-year-old man is unlikely to be approved for a heart transplant. Well, some medical choices and trade-offs may be obvious, but others may be more complicated. And if you're that individual what those decisions are being made for, I don't know if you would agree. I think in a country like the United States that is founded on fierce and violent independence, it is going to be a difficult cultural adaptation. So the most important decision is who makes the decision when it comes to the rationing of care, which is inevitable with a government-run system. So that's just a little words of wisdom economically from Thomas Sowell. This week you'll be getting into your own research. So what we have for your assignment this week is an annotated bibliography. You're going to want to submit that bibliography for at least 5 sources that you plan to use as support in your finance and reimbursement presentation. So what is a bibliography? It's simply a list of citations to books, articles, and documents, and then a brief 150-word max descriptive and evaluative paragraph. And the purpose of doing this is to inform the reader of the relevance, accuracy, and quality of the sources that you're citing. So you can use, if you use Microsoft Word, there's a great feature for APA compliance of citing your references. So you may want to consider that. And then even though your assignment says 2 of your sources may come from popular sources like CNN broadcast, newspaper articles, something like that, I'm going to ask that you do not do this. Will I mark you down? No, because it's allowed in your assignment, but it is not going to serve you well at all academically or in your profession to use sources that come from non-fact-based, opinionated, non-peer-reviewed sources. That would not be, those sources there, whether they're news broadcasts, newspaper articles, magazines, those are not acceptable academic sources in the real world. So yes, you're allowed to use 2. I'm going to ask you and caution you against doing that. Find 5 sources that are academically acceptable. So what does that mean? Peer-reviewed journals, what are those? Things like Health Affairs, Journal of Health Economics, PubMed, PLOS-Med, things of that nature, peer-reviewed journals that you would find through Google Scholar, places like that. Make sure that you are annotating everything that you submit in writing in APA format. There is a link here to OWL Purdue, which can answer all of your questions about citing your references and how to format that. And one final note on that, because I've noticed this in some of your papers, where you have cited references on your reference page, but you actually never used that reference in the body of what you wrote. So the only citations that end up on a reference page are those that you actually cite within the body of your document or your essay. And make sure those are all in APA format as well. Then we have a quiz this week, and that is week 4. A lot of research for you to do, and make sure you spend due diligence doing this, because this will be, these sources that you put on your bibliography will be what you're going to base your final finance and reimbursement presentation on. So like always, send me an email, contact me if you have any questions or if I can be of help in any way, and we will see you throughout the week. All right.